Ireland is a nation, as we know, that punches very much above its weight, whether that be in the arts or music and sport. We've got a painful but a noble history, a history about challenging injustice and working in solidarity with the poor. However, all too often we've been misrepresented on the world stage, whether it be through political or business leaders that have been entertaining their own agendas rather than the agenda of the people and the agenda of the majority. Mary Robinson has been an exception to this. She's worked at the various highest levels, whether it be as President of Ireland or as UN Commissioner for Human Rights. Her achievements and her honours are too numerous to mention. And more recently, she has returned to Ireland as President of the Mary Robinson Foundation for Climate Justice. And there cannot be a more urgent cause than climate justice. If there is no planet, there are no people. So this is something we need to address quite urgently. I would have expected that Mary Robinson would have well earned her retirement at this stage, that she could come back to Ireland and retire into the west of Ireland and relax. However, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going, and it does seem that Mary Robinson is a tough woman. So I'm very, very happy and honoured to welcome Mary Robinson. So thank you very much.
Well, hello everyone. You seem very happy. You seem very inspired, very kind of engaged, and it's great to see so many of all different ages, including quite a lot of young people, which I know is part of the messaging here this afternoon. I'm really delighted to be with you all for Possibilities 2011, the partnership that has been formed by three important Irish NGOs, Children in Crossfire, spunout.ie and AFRI. I think, I'd just like to pay tribute to their vision, especially at this point in time in Ireland, where they know we need to come together in this kind of spirit and lift each other and go forward together. As you know, Possibilities 2011 aims to inspire awareness and action to tackle the big health, social, economic and environmental challenges facing us, and to promote people-powered action for change. I'm sure all of you who'd had the privilege this morning of listening to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and there were a lot of other people following online, do feel inspired and energized. When he spoke in advance of this, his third visit to Ireland, the Dalai Lama said, and I want to quote him because it captures everything I think we want to think about here. Our world is in turmoil, but this also provides an opportunity for true transformation towards peace, justice and happiness if we show the courage and hope. And it's in this context that I've been asked to address the theme of the initiative, Be the Revolution. Be the Revolution, which, as you know, is inspired by Gandhi's famous saying, be the change you want to see in the world. Let me start by explaining what the word revolution means to me, because it isn't a very narrow definition. It can mean different things to different people. To me, it's simply a significant and hopefully peaceful change in an organizational or power structure. And very often, it happens in a relatively short period of time. It comes, after all, from the Latin word revolutio, which means a turnaround. Throughout our history, revolutions have tended to be on a national or even regional level. Now, however, not least because of the power and impact of the World Wide Web, we're seeing the impacts of revolutions on a global scale. And all revolutions are effectively being reported in our homes. Truly, we can say that we do live in a global village. Just think in recent months, as we've followed on our screens the young men and women, and not so young, professors and teachers and grandmothers and others, who came out into the streets and squares of Tunisia, of Egypt, of Yemen, of Bahrain, of Syria, of Libya now in a more difficult, because there's an armed struggle element to it, circumstances. And what did they want? What were they asking for? What were they discussing in the square? And it's interesting that they felt they had the courage to come to the square because of social media. They were able to be in contact with enough people to know, I won't be there on my own. There'll be others there with me, so I can meet and I can discuss. And they discussed, yes, they needed jobs, high unemployment, particularly high youth unemployment, but they also wanted human dignity, to be free of repressive laws, to have human rights and freedom and equality. And I think that this is a very powerful message to the world. In a rather negative but accurate way, Moises Naim, the global economist, has identified what he calls the 5 globalized wars: the illegal drugs trade, money laundering, arms smuggling, trafficking in people, and pirating intellectual property. He says that these wars pit individual countries against loose, shadowy, transnational networks empowered by new technologies and by the forces of globalization. So Naim argues that ultimately the ability of states to prevail will depend on their willingness to strategically surrender portions of their sovereignty, work with other countries, and support multilateral efforts against their new common foes. We do need that kind of coming together. These are global truths, but they are presented in a negative way. But that's understandable, because war, after all, is extremely negative. What must be positive is our reaction, and I believe that it's in our collective interest to defend, to strengthen, and yes, to reform the multilateral system in which we've invested so much, so that it can meet this and other challenges of the 21st century. This is a way we can be revolutionary. And key to that revolution must be a greater sense of shared responsibility for and commitment to the implementation of international human rights law. And remember that international human rights law will cover every issue identified as part of the aspirations of Possibilities 2011: health, social, economic, and environmental challenges. So let me address just 2 of these issues at a little more length. And the first is health, because that's an area that I've been involved in for a number of years now, particularly kind of at the more global level. From 2002, when I finished my UN work, to 2010, I was based in New York working with Realizing Rights. And one of our areas of activity was in relation to health via our Global Health Equity program. When we reached our planned end in December, one of our legacy programs was the Global Health and Development Program, based at the Aspen Institute, which will continue the work in the following areas: the Global Health Workforce Alliance, the actual brain drain of doctors and nurses, because they're enticed to where there are higher wages and higher and better opportunities to make progress, but they leave behind broken health systems. So we have to find a way to address that. Women's global health, including maternal mortality and reproductive health, community-based models of financing for health, and more effective aid in development assistance for health. Closer to home, but also in the health area, though in a very different aspect of health, a very interesting initiative was launched just last month in the United Kingdom, next door, linking business, health, and individual responsibilities. It's called the Public Health Responsibility Deal. And it recognizes that businesses can be powerful influencers on the lives of all of us in a variety of ways, including many ways that affect our life choices and therefore, obviously, our health. If we just look at food consumption, businesses have both the technical expertise to make healthier products and the marketing expertise to influence purchasing habits. If the full strength of these skills can be directed towards activities to encourage and enable people to make healthier choices, because they have the options, healthier choices, as many responsible businesses are already doing, the benefits could be great. The Public Health Responsibility Deal has been established to maximise these benefits, and its strength lies in the sheer diversity, the sheer variety of organisations that it is endeavouring to bring together. Specific pledges in terms of activity and timescale have already been made by bodies as diverse as the National Heart Forum, American Express, Which magazine, the YMCA, but these are then coupled with and joined with multinationals like Kraft, McDonald's and Coca-Cola. An interesting mix of public sector, commercial and civil society, and all about determining what businesses can do to accelerate the progress towards public health goals. I believe that this initiative is worth watching, as it can genuinely be a revolution we should also want to be part of. And it recognises, as the UK Department of Health has said, and I quote, that commercial organisations can reach individuals in ways that other organisations, governments included, cannot. But while these multinationals have all signed up to the responsibility deal to bring us healthier foods, we, consumers, people, civil society, need to monitor that they will stick to their promises. It's interesting and even odd to see that such a diverse range of organisations are all agreeing to do some significant things, such as listing calories on products, removing trans fats, etc., when there's every likelihood that this will actually cost them money and may, in fact, reduce profit. So time will tell, but I would encourage those of you with an interest in health to monitor these very different projects, which are focused on health, but from very different perspectives. Because unless we hold to account those with power and responsibility, there is slippage, as we know. Our responsibility is to hold to account. In Realising Rights, we were also addressing the right to decent work, corporate responsibility for human rights, and women's leadership on peace and security. And we were beginning to address a very important environmental issue, the threat of climate change, which actually is relevant to all of these areas. And it's on this second challenge that I'd like to also address you briefly. There are numerous examples of how this environmental challenge impacts. For example, realising the right to health for all will be severely compromised by increasing temperatures and agricultural crop failures, and by severe weather effects and destruction of infrastructure. We know that malaria is already in areas it wasn't in before because of climate change. The right to decent work opportunities will be undermined by interruptions in food production and forced migration due to weather changes. These are only a few of the many examples of how climate change undermines the enjoyment of human rights and sustainable development. Yet in all these instances, it's clear that what we need is what we increasingly call a climate justice approach. Climate justice compels us to consider the human impacts of climate change, as well as our shared responsibilities, which are different. They're common but differentiated responsibilities. The poor in poor countries have not been causing the greenhouse gas emissions. Those of us who have been living in a lifestyle based on carbon are causing those greenhouse gas emissions. I first became critically aware of the justice impacts of climate change when I was doing some research on a wonderful woman called Barbara Ward. She was an eminent intellectual, moral voice, a visionary, and a superb communicator who established the International Institute for Environment and Development, IIED, in London in 1973. Her great insight was that environment and development were inextricably linked, and she argued forcefully for development that offered hope both for today's poor and tomorrow's children. Her legacy, I believe, can guide us and guide Possibility 2011 as we wrestle with climate change, and it certainly guides me when I seek the human rights dimension in any given policy area, including climate change. I know that in Be the Revolution, you're also thinking and have been listening this morning to personal responsibility. You know, how does this impact on me? What should I do? And that's also part of human rights, which isn't just about rights, it's also about duties. And I carry around with me, as I think you know, now a rather battered copy of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I'm not going to read the whole declaration to you, but I wanted to refer to an article that I think we need to think about a little bit more, especially at this point of time in Ireland. Article 29, so it's the second last article, there are only 30 articles. Article 39 says everyone has duties to the community, in which alone the free and full development of his or her personality is possible. It's a very interesting and profound statement, and it's revolutionary, which is why I wanted to quote it directly. In fact, I quoted it a little bit better than it is written here in the Universal Declaration, because it's not very gender sensitive in the Universal Declaration, but I make a point of improving it. And let me just read it one more time, because it's hard sometimes to take these things in. Everyone has duties to the community, in which alone the free and full development of his or her personality is possible. So if you kind of break that down, unless we know that we have duties to the community, and unless we do something about it, we ourselves don't reach the full development of our personality. And actually, those of you, and I think it includes many, many of you in this room, who do things for your community, know exactly what that means. If you do things for your community, you get back far more than you ever gave. You feel enriched. You feel somehow that it's had a particular and very positive impact on you yourself. So it fits, I think, very much with the spirit of Possibility 2011, because I am very impressed by the positive message that you are all sending and that the organisers have been emphasising. Richard Moore of Children in Crossfire, who has such enormous personal and community reasons to be bitter and to be negative, is always, as you know, remarkably positive, as he has been today. Richard has said that the Dalai Lama, and I quote, is someone respected by people from all walks of life, someone who can help us realise the real possibilities for change that exist in amongst all the tough times. How right he is. And let me, in conclusion, pick up the positive attitude shown so consistently by Richard and stress that no matter how bleak things may seem, we must express in a positive way our response at every opportunity. Let me kind of illustrate this very simply by really showing how important communicating positively can be. Let's take the phrase, "I have a nightmare." I have a nightmare. It immediately conveys a sense of negativity and pessimism. If Martin Luther King had used that instead of "I have a dream," I have a dream. I have a dream in his iconic Washington address in 1968. I was in Harvard Law School at the time, and I remember his killing shortly afterwards and how devastated we were. But his words have lived on and influenced millions around the world because of the message that he's conveying. So let me be bold enough, if you like, to paraphrase part of that wonderful address by Martin Luther King and say that I have a dream that one day the world will rise up and live out the creed that all men and women are created equal, and that we have a responsibility to ensure that they have equal life chances. That's pure human rights. We all agree it in principle. We don't always implement it in practice. The revolution necessary to ensure the realization of that dream is the revolution that I want to be part of, and that because you're here, you obviously want to be part of. So let's be part of it together. It's been wonderful to address you. You're a great audience. Thank you. Thank you very much.